All right, so I got a very special guest in the house today on this podcast, and I'd like to, obviously, every single person that comes out on my podcast, I appreciate their time. So first and foremost, I appreciate your time for coming out.
Thank you.
So let everybody know what you're doing here in the Rio Grande Valley.
Sure. So I've been doing the Comic-Con since I did the Dead Zone, and they have the Q&A format in those shows, and I really enjoyed doing it. So we put a tour together where we're going to have movie screenings, and then I do a live Q&A after with the audience, tell stories, take questions. And it's been a blast, man. Fans are really, responding and loving it. We started in Oklahoma, and we're moving across Texas, and then we're going to Michigan. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I was researching you because I found out you're going to be on my podcast, and I was like, all right, do my research. You seem like a really good person.
Thanks, man.
So it's very hard because I think the world we live in now, social media driven, social media likes, you got to see views, you got to see all this stuff. And I think it's very important for the people that are coming up in age. I have 2 kids. They're all over social media, TikTok, all these things, and they're just looking at these things and just that's their visual picture of everything. And for you growing up as a child star, I mean, you're a huge phenomenon. And I think your movies have literally shaped a lot of the 80 babies like myself, right? So we grew up with you.
Thank you.
So what I wanna ask you is, being a child star, there's a lot of negative stigmas with this stuff. Mm-hmm. How did you combat that stuff, or did you just have a good head on your shoulder all the time?
You know what? Like a lot of us, it starts with having a great mother, right? I had a very strong mother, Italian, Irish, Catholic family. My mom was from Boston, but she raised me to go to church. We went to mass. She taught me about character, and my father did too. She remarried, and my stepfather was great. So I think that was a very important thing: faith, family, like anybody, no matter what you do. So I think the application of those things are the good fortune. Thank God that I had a really good family. Plus, I grew up on the East Coast. I didn't grow up in Hollywood in that bubble, so I think a lot of those things contributed to it. But yeah, so that's it, And I think I was raised to believe, you judge people by what they do, not what they say. You don't want to judge anyone. And
right.
At the same time, you got to be a good person. So that all comes from having great mothers, as many of us are fortunate to have, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the world we live in now, since the internet's around, it literally shrunk the world. Like, where I can meet people like you and follow you and then follow other people and get you on these podcasts. It's a very cool thing.
It's interesting how you just said that. Like, it did kind of shrink the world in a way, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also created more. It's also the speed of technology, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But you're right. These younger generations have grown up with it.
And they grew up and they're smart.
Yeah.
It's not like, all right, well, I went through school. No, they learn stuff like that. Right. It is insane.
We used to have that library card, right? We used to have to go to the library when we were kids, right? We used to have to actually walk to a payphone and have a quarter to make a call. No, I'm just joking.
What do you think about that? Because I'm always interested in hearing the different perceptives of different people, because when I was growing up, I got to play outside. Kids can't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's become a more dangerous world. Absolutely, I think. But I also feel that a lot of that is the media too. But, you have to be protective. I don't have children yet. I'm getting married for the first time this fall.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. I really, I can't wait to have kids, and even my middle age here. But, you bring up a good point. It's the rate and speed of technology, and the internet has shrunk the world, But I think it's important, make your kids go out and play. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for social media because there's a ton of people that don't want their kids on it. But this is the language that they speak. So when they go out and they talk to people, they're learning all these interactions. And yes, it probably has good things and bad things, right? But
sure.
I feel like it's going to outweigh it in the future because technology, the speed of everything, it just helps people grow faster,
right.
smarter.
You're right. It's better to embrace it than be behind the 8 ball. Yeah.
So what do you think about privacy? So Facebook, Google, Instagram, I'm a digital marketer by trade.
Yeah.
So privacy is a huge thing. Emails, phone numbers, all these things.
Sure.
What do you think about that stuff?
Well, it's interesting. It can easily cross a line of, Big Brother, right? So I think it's important to protect that. I mean, it comes up with the controversy with Apple, right? And do they release information if someone is involved in a crime that might involve their phones or whatever? Yeah, it's a very important and interesting issue. I lean towards, protecting privacy because obviously those, we want our liberties here in America and we enjoy those to express ourselves, but obviously those issues are important too.
Yeah.
And some of it's very fluid, again, because it's a new century. I think some of it's, is yet to be established. So it's interesting times.
Yeah. I find it very interesting because TikTok, it's a huge app now, right? It's 500 million people on it. My daughter's on it. I was super hesitant about being on it because it's my demographic. I'm a huge numbers guy. My demographic skews to 69.5% female that are between the ages of 6 and 15. So I'm very aware of the content that I'm pushing out. I'm not talking about drinking. I'm not talking about any of this stuff. I'm super sensitive about what I put on there. So I do like food challenges and stuff like that. And I think that as an adult, having your kids grow up in this world, we as adults have a responsibility to be doing these things because they're a future.
I agree with you. You know, the same thing comes to mind when I'm doing these shows, because sometimes I'll see kids in the audience and I don't have any, need or desire to start cussing and doing all that. If I was with my boys, just kind of locker room talk or whatever. So I agree. I think it's very important, the message, and keeping things positive and giving younger generations a clear view of what's possible. And at the same time, doing it in a clean way. I don't think it's necessary to be vulgar or all that, and I think like you said, it's very important now more than ever because technology is putting it in the hands of younger generations.
Yeah. My little boy's 3. Awesome. I think he's already seen YouTube and all this stuff. So it's like, dude, come on, man. They're fast.
I'm amazed. Every time I go to an Apple store and you'll see some 5-year-olds sitting around and they're just wailing away on laptops. It's amazing.
It's very easy for them versus us when we had to actually learn this stuff.
Oh, I was such an idiot in high school. I remember walking by 9th grade in the mid 80s going, the computer was new and I'm going, I don't want that. That's never going to work. I was a total idiot,
Yeah. So I'm a huge proponent for technology. I think it's very interesting. So you actually, the internet, we're talking about the internet, right? So Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Hi, Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph always comes out on the podcast.
He's awesome.
So Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Sure.
How did you prepare for a role I mean, he's one of the most iconic billionaires and minds of our time. Mm-hmm. How did you, because I'm always interested in actors. Like, what mind frame do you have to go in? Do you go all in?
Yeah, no, I totally did. Yeah, and you know what? The first thing that came to mind is when I got the audition. The first thing I did is my manager at the time loaned me a pair of goofy glasses that he would have worn in the 80s. So I had then I did the comb over. But no, seriously, in the making of the film, I did those things for the audition. In the making of the film, I wanted to read as much as I could. So I read a bunch of biographies about him. There was one called Hard Drive and Overdrive. And, I just tried to get as close to him through books as I could. And I watched some documentaries. And I also had a great acting coach that was hired for me by the producers of the film at the time. And it was a guy named Steve Bridgewater that worked with Brad Pitt and Johnny Depp. And we kind of deconstructed him in about 6 weeks before I made the film. And by that, I mean, we would work on the dialogue. We would look at his life. We would study his body language. We were doing really interesting things. So that's how I prepared. I read and I worked with an acting coach. And this is a really funny thing. He had this kind of at least when he was younger, kind of a Kermit the Frog type of voice, you know what I mean? And my acting coach at the time, Steve, suggested to help me with that I put a piece of cotton in my nose. So this is really funny, but it's a true story. Part of my development and preparation for that film was I would cut up little pieces of tampon and put it in my nose, which would help me to get that kind of Kermit the Frog. Isn't that funny? So that's actually, some scenes I actually have cotton up in the
really?
Nose. Yeah, it's goofy stuff.
That's crazy.
That
I love how actors can do all these type of things, and you really don't know about this stuff until you ask them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just having fun with it, we were laughing about it while I was doing it. I have to.
That's awesome. So obviously you're a very creative person. A lot of creative people, entrepreneurs, a lot of people watch this podcast. A little bit of everything, right?
Oh, great.
But creatives specifically, I believe that the creative people here that know how to sell are going to be the ones that make it in the social media world.
Sure.
So how do you stay creative?
Great question. I've always felt that that's a huge part of just my life personally for me since I was a kid. Growing up, I loved sports. I loved artists. I loved studying musicians. I loved actors, movies. So, the idea of, and then I discovered reading, and that's huge and very important. I didn't necessarily get those things from school in my own life. I just kind of became a reader after high school, actually. But the idea and the notion of keeping inspired is really important for all of us, right? We're always seeking content now, we call it, right? But growing up, it was records. And, my heroes growing up ranged from Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee to athletes, to Bob Dylan, to the Beatles, studying culture and all that. So I think that was always really important to me. And I also feel that it remains important for us as artists, as creative people, to keep a hungry mind. Because we're always learning, right? So, and as an extension of that, I think staying inspired is very important for all of us. Going to get, back in the day, we'd have to go to the record store, right? We'd have to go get music, but finding new music, creating. So many young people are doing their own stuff online, and with technology being the way it is. So I think staying inspired is hugely important.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that the people that I'm always talking about introverted and extroverted. And I know so many creative people that are very introverted that have so much potential. Were you ever introverted? I'm assuming you weren't, but I mean, you
what?
could.
Believe it or not, I actually feel like I am, because in my private life, I love, my lady and I, we live in LA, and I'm just someone who requires a lot of downtime and quiet. So I actually am quite introverted, despite being in my public life with my work, having to be extroverted, But I actually do feel like I am kind of introverted, definitely.
So you're probably falling between the middle somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good thing. But I think, again, in life, it's just that thing of balance, like our parents taught us, like moderation. So I think alone time is really important. Then obviously you need time for your relationship and your family. So again, it comes back to balance, I think.
Right.
But I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. Quite honestly, when I was a kid, I discovered this in myself, and I kind of run to it. I mean, I really appreciate quiet time when I get it during the day. So I have to carve out time for it.
Have you ever been in an isolation tank?
No, what's that like?
So Joe Rogan had always talked about it, right? And it's a chamber that you put yourself in. It's I believe it's about 800 to 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt.
Wow.
200 gallons of water. You just lie down in it, and you eventually become just weightless. It's like you're in space.
Wow.
And you're forced to stay with your mind. You cannot escape anything. So you're forced to stay within yourself, and it's a form of meditation.
Interesting. I want to try that.
It's very interesting. I tried it a few times, and I'm living a very busy lifestyle. I'm assuming you do too, but for being in an hour in there or an hour and a half, sometimes it's like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta do something.
Right.
And I think that's
as Americans, right? Like I'm late for something. Yeah. That's cool.
What's been the best place that you've ever traveled to?
That's great that you tried that. You got me inspired now.
You try it.
Check that out. I know. I'm thinking, like, we're going to find one of those tanks later. Great questions you have. Best place ever that I've traveled to. I went to Europe for the first time when I was 16 with a buddy from high school. And that was kind of like a backpacking tour. And that was my first exposure to leaving our country. And it really opened up my mind. It's amazing. We don't realize that our country, God bless it, is less than 300 years old. So I loved Paris. I'm Italian and Irish in my background. I went to Italy. I loved Italy. We just got engaged in a beautiful place in Sicily called Taormina, which is in the cliffs of Sicily. So I loved Italy. I love Italy still, and I want to go back. So that was recent. So I went back there in September with Lucia. I love Mexico. I've been to places in Mexico I loved. I went to southern Mexico. I love travel. Isn't it such an incredible thing? It's such a beautiful, uplifting experience. Right?
It is. I did two humanitarian missions in Dominican Republic.
Oh, awesome.
We went to one of the most tent polluted places on the planet called Bajo Sahaina. And we stayed with one of the preachers there, the priest, right? And there was the only medical team that goes out and performs surgeries at the hospital.
Yeah.
And they have no running water, nothing. They don't have anything there. And it was one of the most amazing things that I have ever experienced. I want to continue to do it.
Wow.
Because obviously it's rewarding. You don't think of those things until you actually do it.
Right.
And you get your hands dirty and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I made like a little mini film just so I can remember it. But it's amazing because where we were staying, you could see the plant that's dumping all the stuff into the water.
Wow.
You can see the canal where all the feces and all the stuff is going into the water. And these people are some of the most amazing people in the world.
Right. Heart of gold, the salt of the earth. Isn't that amazing how much you can learn and educate yourself just by traveling and being amongst other cultures? Yeah. And sometimes, you can learn more from people that are in more trying circumstances, like you're saying. But there's also a beauty about the simplification of like going to cultures where it's just like, I like when I go somewhere and it's just everything gets stripped down. All the things we grew up with aren't necessary so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah, a lot of noise, right. And I love when you go to some place like ancient or some place like you're mentioning, right, where you just see how beautiful and basic life can be in a simpler level. That's one thing my father always said to me growing up. Keep it simple. It was like a little thing amongst us, So travel is incredible how it expands your mind and opens you up to things. And also gives you, I think it develops your character too, because you start seeing humanity differently. You start realizing, wow,
exactly,
things I took for granted all my life. Look at these people, like you're saying, in an impoverished setting. Well, amazing. Beautiful, man. What was the last place you went to?
The last place, well, that was
was
the
it,
Dominican
yeah.
Republic. I love to travel. I mean, I've been to LA. Those are traveling for me, right? And we go to Iowa, Dubuque, Iowa.
Oh, wow.
So
That must be nice.
Yeah. So the cool thing about Dubuque, Iowa is I played with a music, right? With a band. And they invite us out there, so we're Texas boys, Mexican boys, right?
Yeah.
And full of white people. I love it because we stand out. We stand out, and the director, Susan, she loves us. She's like, I'm gonna have you guys back, my Texas boys, every single year.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think being a good person, being personable, being able to step out of your comfort zone, having social skills, is something that's super important that you need. So that leads me to my next question.
Great point. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you need college, or do you think you can become successful without college?
Well, in my life, I was very blessed because I had this career as a young man, and I chose to further develop it. But there was education involved in that for me because I studied with acting teachers and I worked on it, and I really developed myself. I've always looked at it like it was my sport in a way, being in this industry. But I think, again, back to my father, I want to quote something that he said. He put a sign up in my room with my sister when we were growing up. And it was a term that he had written, and it was freedom through education and experience. So I think it's invaluable. I mean, although I did not have that experience, of course, I want my children to have that in the future. And at the same time, there's nothing that replaces education. But just like you don't have to be in church to pray, you can pray anywhere. And I think it's just equally important to know that we always have to be educating ourselves in and out of the classroom. But I would totally encourage kids to further their education, and definitely don't undercut that. I mean, that's hugely important because, as they say, knowledge is power.
Right.
And just, despite your particular field and whatever you endeavor to do in your life, you always want to be learning, I think, because it just broadens your perspective, like you said, as travel does. It's interesting. So I think those are great questions.
You seem like a man of faith. Is that it's obviously your upbringing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So how hard is it to be able to bring that mentality into the industry that you're in?
That's a great question. I think really what it is, just refining yourself as a person. It's more like how can I apply it to that? That's how I look at it. So again, back to the things you said, you've made great points today. I think when you learn to work in a field, let's say you're coming up, I mean, a lot of that is really important. Like, there's a certain meditative quality to doing business the right way, having good manners, being on time, the things that it takes to be professional, for example, are the same things that, in similar ways you can apply your faith to work, where it's like, to be a better person in situations where you realize, okay, well, I've been in that person's place too, So I think those are great questions. Yeah, I think it's important to apply that because we're all God's children. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. But it's important to improve and refine yourself.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I find it very interesting that the world we live in, because it's so fast. There's so many different ideas now that come to everybody, and anybody can choose what they want to believe, right? And I find it very interesting that a lot of people now, like here in the Rio Grande Valley, there's 1 million Catholics. So my father-in-law is a deacon. So he's sharing all these stories with me, right? So I find it very interesting in the world that we live in as social media, Catholic here. In our area, we're very prideful people. And I think it's called the Chisme here in the Valley. And have you visited the Valley before?
No, I got to expand and I want to explore it. Yeah.
You're going to love it because people are going to treat you good. I guarantee you they're going to try to get you to eat some food. You're going to love it.
Good, because I'm always eating. I love to eat. Yeah, that's
You got to try the little taquerias on the side.
Okay,
not like these big, huge franchises, right?
Okay, right.
These little taquerias, oh man, they're made by some of the best people, some of the hardest working people here in the Valley.
Well, the best tasting food.
Yeah,
I love it.
you could taste the love in there, man.
That's awesome, man.
So one more
stop at a
time.
bunch on the way home. I'm having like a long afternoon lunch and just stop at a bunch. That's
Just stop by a
advice.
bunch, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So where are you headed tonight?
So where are we tonight? We're going to be at Buffalo Wild Wings. Yeah, and they were kind enough to invite us to watch a game, so I'm excited. We're going to hang out and have some good food and meet people there. And we'll have T-shirts and movie posters and stuff like that if people want to purchase stuff, and I'll be happy to sign it. And
Awesome.
I'm just looking forward to having a good time and hanging out.
And tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night we're going to be at Cine El Rey. There's going to be a 5 p.m. screening of 16 Candles and then one at 7:30. So get your tickets and come on out and enjoy us, watch a good old movie, have some great laughs. And then I do a live Q&A, as I said, and we do, tell stories and take questions, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's going to be awesome. Well, so before we finish off the podcast, I have to talk about Kobe. Kobe, my gosh, Why do you think it had such an effect on people around the world?
You know what? The first thing that came to mind is a saying that I learned a few years ago. And in my ignorance, I can tell you, I don't know if it's Aristotle or Socrates, but he said, character is destiny. And that is a powerful statement. That goes back to faith, and the kind of man or woman that any of us are or can be is rooted in character. And it's not something you can buy. It's nothing you can fake. And I think beyond his accolades and the great athlete that God made him to be, I think he had great character.
Yeah.
And I think that it was a wake-up call for all of us. And I think that's maybe why God uses people when he takes them young. Insofar as that they're meant to be a shining light, and that light won't fade. And even though there's great sadness in being taken, because we all loved him, I think the character is what stood out. And I think everybody's shocked because we're going to miss that guy who was such a shining light. And what a beautiful person, and what a great family man and great guy that he evolved into. And there's an interesting irony to this too, buddy, because I was here years ago. The now President Trump, he invited me to be a guest judge on Miss Teen USA. This is going back 25 years ago, probably, because Kobe was a rookie. And Kobe was also a guest judge that year. And so I met him in South Padre Island years ago, and the president hired us to both be a part of that. And it was a real honor. And I was just a kid, even though I was probably 10 years older than him. I was probably about 30, but I felt like I was still 20, and I was doing the dead zone, I believe. And, I had a chance to meet him then, and we were just kids. It was actually long before the dead zone, excuse me. But just an amazing guy. And again, it's also a lesson, too, that not only great character and great talent, but what he did with it, right? Because God gives us all talents.
Right.
And here's something my mother taught me. This is a beautiful saying. She said, Michael, your talents are God's gift to you, but what you do with them is your gift to God. So I think what he did with his life as a great athlete and a great philanthropist, working with kids and children, young children, setting up the basketball school for girls. I mean, how God evolved him and made him into something even greater than just the great athlete on the floor is incredible, both as a family man and as a man of character. So I think that we were all hit with that in the face, like, wow, we were so appreciative of this while he was here. But then when God takes someone, I think that's part of the lesson maybe, is that God's maybe reinstilling those things for us to look at.
It's an interesting take. I love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on my
Me
podcast.
Too. Yeah, great
Thank
to be
you
with you,
very
man.
much.
Real pleasure.
Great meeting you.
You too, man. Thanks.